Shout out Sean, man.
Changing the game through real estate. Yeah, changing the game through real estate. I can never wait.
For having me. So, just as context, I'm in the Bay Area in California, and I do all my investing out of state in Cincinnati, Ohio. So, I started last March looking for my first property, and it was my senior year of college, and it was the very beginning of the pandemic. And so, I work in the commercial real estate world, and it kind of died down as did the entire world, and I had time to refocus my efforts on something else, and I chose real estate investing. So, what better time to redirect focus and priorities and think about passive income than the pandemic? So, I bought my first property shortly after in July of 2020, and since then, I've bought 23. So I flip single families and I burr multifamilies. So that's what I've been doing for the past year and a half.
Okay, so you said you were in the commercial real estate. So you kind of had a background with real estate, or what do you do for commercial real estate?
A little bit, yeah. So I am in office leasing primarily. So it's a different asset class, but it's still definitely in real estate. So it helped me get a little bit more comfortable with lingo, talking about cap rates, especially when you get into the larger multifamily. I think I could talk to a lot of brokers because I'm a broker, and so kind of speak the broker lingo a little bit better. It's I used to do a lot of account management. I guess I still do a lot of account management, and that has to do with managing portfolios all over the world. And so the out of state investing models a little bit similar to that, where you're relying on experts in other markets to feed you market information and run your deals while sitting in California. So it's a little bit of transferable skills there.
Oh wow! So why Cincinnati? What made you say like, hey, I'm in San Diego? Like, hey, Cincinnati? Like,
yeah, I was gonna say, have you been to Cincinnati, or did you just pick it?
I had been once, and so I was doing some work for my commercial real estate job. So I was bringing a client over to Cincinnati, and just through that, it was a pretty big deal. So it was a ground up development. So I toured with all of the big developers in Cincinnati, and kind of was sold from them on the economy and what was going on and all the revitalization. I was able to meet one of the local investors there as well, who jumped on a Zoom call with me and showed me the market. And so that was the best orientation I've had in any market, and said, might as well jump in there where the prices are good and I've got some market orientation, and I didn't really have any competitive advantage elsewhere.
Okay. So what were the numbers that you really enticed you to go over there? Like what were you looking for?
$100,000 purchase prices. So I mean, I was in college when I started looking, and so I had just like my savings account from working through college, and so I had like maybe $40,000 in my bank account, and so had $20,000 I was willing to spend on a down payment. So I needed something that was low priced, and that kind of met the criteria bucket. And then also the price to rent ratios are pretty high over there. And so you can easily meet the 1% rule, if not more. And so for me, so I'm a 100% commission based broker. And so passive income and cash flow is a little bit more important to me, just because I rely on, I need like consistent income between commission checks. And so having that cash flow is really important for me when picking a market.
Huh. So after you talked to him, that person you talked to, did they already have a team established? Just like, hey, just use my team, or like, how did you go about like?
Not really. So I mean, I think contractors are really few and far between out there, and so it's kind of like, well, I have my contractor who works on my stuff, but and so he used his contractor to kind of walk through my first property for me, because I bought it sight unseen, basically off of Zillow. So I basically said, like, please, can you please go walk through it with one of your contractors? And he did. He referred me to an agent, and through there just kept on going through the referral network of asking other people for introductions.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
So how terrifying was that? Buying your first one sight unseen.
It seems like 10 years ago, honestly. I was very terrified. It was all my eggs in one basket. It was like my whole life savings into one house, even though I look back and it's like it's 20 grand, which I guess is a lot of money. But if I were to risk it all, it might as well be while I'm 23 and not
Yeah.
later down the line. So it was very scary, especially not walking the property beforehand. But I think it's really funny because I have walked properties prior to buying now. And I think that not seeing it in person is actually less scary than seeing it in person because you get overwhelmed by how many things there are to fix. And you're like, oh, well, it must be so expensive to fix this and that and this. And my level of perfection is probably a lot higher than renter's level of perfection. So honestly, like sitting over here looking through pictures probably kind of hid a lot of the scariest stuff from me before I bought it. I didn't know what I was jumping into.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine trying to like buy something, having seen it. You're just saying like, I just got to completely trust this person that they're not just screwing you over that.
I mean, that's probably a good thing. I just never went through analysis paralysis because I think when people research too much, they
Yeah.
know too much and they're overeducated and know everything that could happen wrong. But me having started research in March and put an offer in May and June and went under contract in June, it was so fast that I didn't even have a chance to sit and think like, well, what if I lost it all?
Yeah, that's true.
And so was that just a single family one that you intended to rent, or was that your
Yeah,
plan?
so I still have it. I still actually self-manage it because it's been so easy to self-manage, but it's just a single family. I bird it, so I bought it for 100. I actually got a 0% APR credit card to pay for the renovation, and then
Oh wow.
spent about, I think, $12,000 on it on the renovation, and then I refinanced it for $155,000 after repair value 6 months later. So I left about $7,000 in the deal,
Mhm.
and it cash flows just over. I think it's like $500 a month, which is pretty good.
So when you say cash flow, are you taking like just the gross rent minus the mortgage? Are you taking in like cash
Reserves as well,
expenses or everything?
everything.
Okay.
So besides property management, just because I property manage myself, but that's after the 5% capex, 5% repairs and maintenance, 5% vacancy, and then the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance.
Nice.
Oh wow.
Awesome.
So you referred to a couple minutes ago the 1% and 2% rule. Can you explain to people what that is if they don't listen to Bigger Pockets and not really sure what the 1% or 2% rule is?
Sure. I think it's formally called the price to rent ratio, and so it's the price of the property. So if you bought something for $200,000 and then divided that by the rent, so if it's 1%, it would be $2,000, and so that's just a good indication of cash flow. If you want to do a quick sniff test of a deal, and that's a generally good way to like back of the napkin sniff test to
Yeah.
see if it might cash flow.
Through a word the other person, like how'd you find that contractor that you rely on so much?
So the first contractor, I've actually fired many contractors, but that first contractor I found on Bigger Pockets. He's also my property manager, and there was some just systems things that were going on with the company that weren't up to what I expected, and so had to go find another contractor. The next contractor moved to Guatemala unexpectedly. His replacement didn't speak English, and so unfortunately couldn't really work with him very well.
Yeah.
And so I've actually gone through quite a few contractors, and that's honestly been one of the biggest learning experiences. Is step one is buy the deal, but that's really just the tip of the iceberg. And managing renovations and property management and all the systems that goes into that is really the rest of the iceberg that isn't probably as sexy as buying the deal.
So how do you just do trial and error, trying to figure out what property manager works best? Because it's like for me, like I know everyone here, so I feel like it's easier. But like for me going to like a new market, I was like, man, I don't know any of these people. I don't know if I can trust them, like because it's like kind of that fear. How do you say, hey, this is a good property manager, this isn't a good property manager, I'm gonna go with this person?
I mean, there's a variety of questions that you can probably ask them, but part of the, I guess, benefit of investing out of state is you're forced to just give up control. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people who invest locally have a really hard time giving up control. But if you just had no option, you'd have no option. Like you're just forced to trust people and rely on people and build systems and checks and balances that keep people in place. I mean, obviously, I've gone through a lot of contractors and a good amount of property managers, and I've talked to a lot of agents, and it's not. I wish it were easy as like you pick one person and they're your dream team. But that's part of investing out of state, is just expecting that sometimes your team members aren't going to be the dream team at first, and trying them out on each project until you do find that dream team. So it's not about the first deal or the second deal. It's about the 10th and the 11th and the 12th.
Nice. Do you have a particular agent that you stick with that looks for these deals for you, or do you kind of?
I actually have a few. So I liked on Flip specifically, I like to use the agent who brings me the deal. And so if they bring me the deal, they make less on the acquisition, but they'll know that they make a good amount on the disposition, so selling the property. Also, it's nice to have an agent who does both, so they can check on the property maybe halfway in between to make sure that the progress is going well. So that's another thing you can do with checks and balances, is make sure to have independent people who are separate from your general contractor or your subcontractors to go ahead and check in on your projects, make sure things are actually happening. That was one of my big lessons as well, is trusting contractors too much to say that they were doing what they were doing. And being out of state, you just like to think that people are good people. But I think that a lot of some contractors tend to take advantage of that and maybe do a little bit less good work, because no one's there like nitpicking every day. And so one thing I did was hire a project manager to go check on projects every week. And so that's been really helpful, especially for quality control.
Okay, so you mentioned your first one was kind of more like you're all in from your life savings that you had. How, for the other ones, did you use that BRRRR strategy and just keep rolling it, or did you eventually bring on investors, or kind of?
Yeah. So I brought my next two properties in December of that same year. So it was about, I think, 5 months after the first one. And it was a triplex and my first flip. And so the triplex was bought with a little bit more of my savings that I had left over, since I used a credit card for the renovation. And then the other portion was actually private money. So that was my first experience with private money from a family member. And so that one, actually, I did not BRRRR, but it does cash flow a lot of money. And so at the moment, I don't need to bother with refinancing. But the third one was the flip, and that was bought with hard money. So I brought $3,500 to the closing table, and so basically nothing. And then that one closed in June, I think June of this year. So that was the first full successful flip.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Nice. And how many rentals do you have right now?
So 19 rental units. And so that's comprised of a single family, a triplex, a 5-unit, and a 10-unit.
Awesome.
Oh, wow.
Very cool.
Is it just you, or do you have a partner also?
So part of them are just mine. The first 4 are mine. Then the rest of them are with a partner. And so those were the two things: private money and partner, just one partner, who that really, I guess, catapulted my investing, is having someone to infuse capital into the project, because I obviously didn't have any money after the first one or the second one. And then also someone to take half of the responsibilities, because managing right now, a month ago, I had like 17 units under construction or something. And it's an insane amount to be managing, as well as like trying to optimize processes, as well as having a full-time job. And so to have someone to handle acquisitions, and so I do all the operations and renovations, and he does all of the acquisitions. It's nice to have someone handling that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could imagine.
For sure.
Because I was watching you on your Instagram page. You were talking about like, oh, I just BRRRRed this whole property and I never even saw it. I was like, how she did? How did that? Because I don't know. I don't know if like I could do that without actually seeing it whatsoever. Because that's a lot of trust into, I guess, your team. But I don't know.
So I guess now that you've like established Cincinnati as like your area, you have your team there and everything, is that the only area that you've invested in so far?
Right now, yes. I think
Okay.
with the amount of effort it took to get a good team, and it's still
For
an
sure.
evolving team at the moment, it would right at the current moment, I think it'd be very exhausting to try to do it again in different
Yeah.
market.
Yeah.
But eventually, I think that so this is more of a cash flow play, and after next year, my goal is to flip one a month and then hit 50 units. And I think after that's figured out, then hopefully expand to an appreciating market.
You said a 50 unit. Are you just trying to get 50 units total, or
50
like?
units total, yeah. So
Okay.
that'd probably be, I think it's like 30. I have one closing next week.
I was
A
gonna say, you don't
duplex.
sound like you're that far.
Yeah.
It's a little bit far. So the four of the 23 are flips, and then 19 are the buy and holds, and then two close next week. So it'll be like 21 this year, and there's quite a
That's
bit
awesome.
more to go next year.
Well, hey, I think 21 in a year is pretty damn good in my opinion. So good job.
So when these agents bring you a deal, do you have one specific criteria, or like, hey, I want to do this amount of flips, I want to do this amount of burrs, I want to do this amount of buy and holds, or is it just kind of depending on the deal itself?
Whatever finds you.
For flips, definitely have a criteria. So I like to stay in a specific neighborhood, and then I like to, or just a set of neighborhoods that are lower priced. And I like to be in the entry level home buyer market instead of those higher end flips, just because I find it to be good for limiting risk. And so usually the purchase price is somewhere between 75 and $150,000, and the renovation is somewhere between $30 and $80,000, usually more around $70,000. And so all in for somewhere around $175,000 or so. And that usually will have an ARV of somewhere between 250 and 300, which is a pretty attainable number for a lot of families out there in Cincinnati, and try to stay away from the flips that are more on the high end of the market, like the 500, 600, $700,000 houses.
Um, I guess so. For someone who's just getting started and everything like that, what would be your best piece of advice for someone who is in an expensive market and hey, I want to go invest in somewhere like Cincinnati or something like that? What would be your best piece of advice?
Yeah, probably find a local investor who does invest in Cincinnati and just try to ask them questions about where exactly in the market they are investing, or if they can give any contacts or have any recommendations for where they can get more educated on the market. I think it's sometimes kind of a fine line about asking too much without giving anything, because I know a lot of
Yeah.
people tend to just ask questions. And so just understanding and respecting people's time, but also finding people who do invest. I think real estate agents are also a great source of information. And so if you can find an investor agent who's knowledgeable and who has investments themselves and can walk you through the market, that's a good way to go as well, especially if you use them to buy a deal, then they're going to be compensated for their time.
So we've talked to you about a lot of the kind of like success you've had in out of state investing. Have you made any mistakes that are kind of like I don't know that are very important that
Like
you
cringe-worthy
yeah.
lessons that you've learned.
Where do I start? There's been a lot. Most recently, it's been, well, one I learned a while ago is trusting agents' ARVs, so after repair values. So when you're either flipping or you're burring and you're going to refinance and you're estimating what your ARVs are going to be, I think a lot of agents give estimates for that number, and if you don't verify them yourselves, you can get into a pickle. And so that's something that I learned the hard way on a deal.
Yeah.
And so now I make sure to verify whenever agents send me over numbers, or even when property managers send me over numbers. There's a lot of public information on Zillow, on Redfin, on websites like Rentometer, on Bigger Pockets Insights, things like that, where you can do your own research and then compare numbers with whoever gave you the information. So that's one. Another one is probably not having a clear scope of work from the very beginning of a project. And so kind of just saying, like, replace the lights. And it's like, what light? What do you want to replace it with? How many do you want to get replaced? And then not being satisfied with the result of the renovation, but it being because I never specified in the beginning what actually I wanted done. And so that's been a big lesson recently for me.
Nice.
Wow.
So when you buy these properties, like sight and scene, flip them, do you go see them all at some point, like to verify everything, or do you just trust the team you put in place and they take care of it for you? And then just check in and get updates.
I'm trying to think of, I think at this point, I've seen all of them at one point in the cycle, but I don't fly out specifically to check on them. So I have happened to be there and stopped in just to see what it looked like, more so because I'm just curious. But I don't really check in on the progress in person. So I really do trust that they're doing their job, and it's helpful when there's people who are invested in the project to go check on it. So if it's a rental, have a property manager check in and be like, well, if it stays in this condition, we're going to have a hard time renting it out. And then they're invested because they make money off of rental rates or just the rent income. And so if they can't rent it out, they're not making money. Same with the flipping. If an agent comes in or a stager comes in, or that type of person who is actually has like monetary investment in the project to have it done and finished the right way, then they're going to be more invested in giving you the honest feedback that you need to get the job done.
True. Very true.
So what was your best deal? What's one that made you the most money? Like the one that you wish you could do every time?
Well, I just started recently, so there's a lot of the ones that are in process, that I assume will be great deals, but I don't want to promise they're good deals because they're not done yet. My first deal was honestly a great deal. If that was still my strategy, I would want that deal over and over again. But I moved away from single family burst because it was going to take too long to get to my passive income goals. And so I moved into multifamily, which are a little bit of a big beast. But if I were to still like the single family model, I think I'd do my first deal over and over again because that $500 of cash flow is pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's true. Because even like a lot of like well, say for instance, over here in Virginia, like most of the time when you like cash flow, it's usually just like the gross rent minus the mortgage because you can't get like the 1% and everything like that. So it's really cool that's why it's so great to talk to you about other markets where you can actually get the 1% rule and 2% rule because a lot of markets you can't find that.
Yeah, I think the trade-off is probably appreciation.
Yeah, that's
The
very true.
Midwest is full of 1% markets, like Indianapolis, probably Detroit, probably, but they're not like places where people are flocking to move to. And so you're not going to get that appreciation gain over time, but you will get cash flow. So it's a trade-off to be aware of.
Yeah.
Do you check like the population to see how many people are coming to Cincinnati? Because if you're investing long term, do you ever like take that into account that hey, is the city getting smaller or like
I
jobs
do
going
look,
away?
yeah, I do. I think I also pay attention to companies who are coming and leaving Cincinnati. And so if there are jobs, there will be people. And so if companies are investing a lot of money in the area, odds are that me as a little investor in the area can also invest my money. And so when you're over there, there's huge cranes, there's big buildings, there's more companies moving there, more jobs. And so if they're going to spend $100 million on a building, I feel more comfortable spending 100,000.
So what's your I guess your goal is to become financially free? Like would your goal be like to eventually quit your job as the commercial real estate because you're commercial like leasing, right? I
Yeah,
forget. Yeah, that's
commercial
right.
leasing broker.
Is that your goal to
Yeah,
like quit that?
I don't think I'll ever particularly stop working. I think it's to get a steady base of passive income so that I can focus my time however I want to focus my time and spend it and not have anyone. And I don't have to work for just because I have to. It's more of a
Yeah.
choice and I get to direct my time where I want to direct it. So that's the ultimate goal.
Do you have a goal set for after you hit your 50 units?
So I really want to
100?
open what's yours?
Yeah.
I want to open I would love to build like a health retreat, some sort of like yoga health retreat, or do some type of like boutique hotel that's more creative and building a brand more
Yeah.
so than just building like cut and paste rentals, because that's sort of how the flip business and the rental business are all getting to be very systematized. And so it's cut and paste, cookie cutter units, go through the process. It's not as creative as I'd like it to be. And so to do something like Airbnbs or boutique hotels where it's really about the experience, I'd like to focus on that after getting a steady base of cash flow.
Yeah.
Something like truly push you and use all your talents that God's blessed you with.
Yeah, no, I think that's just to use my creative brain more so. I think investing is it's both for sure, but to run it like a machine, kind of using more of the analytical brain
Yeah.
and systems brain.
That's true.
And so to not have to necessarily make a killing off of the creative projects and to do it to create experiences for people I think would be really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because I would assume like the very beginning of like the house flipping and all of that, you get to use the creativity. But to your point, when you have the numbers grow, you need it more systematized. So
Yep, you can't do 12 in a
creative
year.
time goes away.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my first one, I picked everything. My second one, I picked everything. It was so time consuming. But
Yeah.
Oh,
if
yeah.
you're trying to flip one a month and you're flipping 6 at a time and trying to pick designs for 6 at a time is just not really feasible. And so to just make like a standard finish list and run it through a process is sort of the goal at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. Well, and I would assume it's more cost effective too, because if you're doing
100%.
that many
Yeah.
units, you could buy in bulk pretty much and just keep using it.
It's a lot easier for contractors too to just say cut and paste than to
Yeah.
tell them you want custom designs and paint colors and everything.
That's true. Yeah. Put the wrong backsplash in the wrong house. That could be bad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, I mean, I think you've answered majority of my questions when it comes to long distance real estate investing. I think the main thing is just like have a right team. It sounds like to have the right team in place and
go for it. That's
yeah,
the other.
And just don't be afraid to fail because it's not really failure. It's just learning experiences.
exactly.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing about between your managing your properties? Like, do you enjoy the managing rentals more than the flipping, or vice versa?
I think I enjoy the flipping a little bit more because there's a little bit more creativity involved. So I do. I do like also working with a project manager and sort of being, I guess, a boss of sorts. I think it's kind of cool to have the responsibility of thinking about how someone can contribute more and how they can feel more fulfilled in their position. And so
Yeah.
I would love I've had that experience in my job where people kind of plan and think of how I can enjoy my experience more. So to be able to do that for someone else is pretty cool too.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's crazy that like you just started for a year and a half and you've gotten to what you've done so far. I mean, that's a lot in a year.
Yeah, not to mention you're like fresh out of college.
Yeah.
Yeah, super impressive.
A pandemic grad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not really even worrying about the money, more or less just found a way to make it work. I think that's truly impressive. So
yeah, there's a lot of money out there. I think that people just don't realize how much is floating around, but you can prove that you work hard and you're trustworthy. I think that, and you can analyze good deals. I think everyone's looking to put their money. A lot of people are looking to put their money to work for them.
Right.
And so if you can show that you're responsible with people's money and can provide them with a return, it's honestly like you just attract it. So I think it's pretty cool to raise private money.
So how did your investor find you? Did he just like find you on social media, or how did they your private
money?
Yes.
So I've raised a lot of private money. About half of it has been from Instagram. So just people finding me on Instagram. And then the other half has just been family and friends and telling them what I do and them wanting to put their money places.
Gotcha.
Nice.
So how do you structure that when you do like a partnership? Do you just do like just make an LLC together, or how do you structure that for your deals?
No, so they're just debt. They don't get any equity. So they get a flat return. And in return, they either get a promissory note, like a personal guarantee, or they get a mortgage on the property.
Oh, okay.
And so Yeah, no equity, just debt.
Oh, okay. And is that for 30 years or 20 years or?
No, so it's usually for about 9 months on the flips. And so people have 9-month terms, and usually they're paid back around 6 months when
Oh,
the
okay.
flip finishes, and they can choose whether or not they can roll their money back into the next deal.
So every deal you look for like something like value add that you can add, something like
Yeah.
distressed. Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Eventually down the line, maybe I think it's a pretty time intensive process. And so if I stack up enough money where I can just buy turnkey deals that cash flow, maybe. But at the moment, the value adds are the best way to scale fast.
I got you. Actually, where's the best place for people to find you more about you? You mentioned your Instagram.
Yeah, probably Instagram. So it's at lattes.and.lisas.
Okay. Is that
I have to ask, what's your coffee order?
It's an oat milk latte at the moment.
Okay.
I used to be a barista. I was a barista for 5 years, and so that's kind of where the username came from before no one followed me but my mom. And so we're just stuck. And so I haven't changed it yet.
I was gonna say, I like it. You should keep it.
Hey, go the McDonald's route and start make like a coffee shop and then start buying real estate using it that way.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
would
There's
absolutely do that.
there's
That's one
your
of my other,
creative outlet.
Yeah.
yeah, one of my other fun projects would be definitely a little coffee shop.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But I appreciate you having you on here and just come in and telling us like your story, and I feel like I've learned a lot.
Yeah, it's really impressive. You've done a lot in a really small amount of time on top of a pandemic. So
Yeah.
good for you.